The air was cold, and harsh winds howled through the snow-covered mountain range. Deep within a narrow tunnel, illuminated by flickering golden lights hanging from frayed wires, two strange beings walked with heavy steps. The first, Zordon Avendreth, had grayish skin and stood tall at nearly 2.5 meters. He wore a red cloak that covered most of his body, though it left his chest partially exposed. Small horns protruded from his head, and a scaly tail was hidden beneath his garments. Beside him stood Yzrek, a similar-looking creature dressed in attire of the same design, though he seemed more cautious and hesitant. "Do you have a death wish, Zordon Avendreth?" Yzrek asked in a low voice, his words echoing faintly through the narrow corridor. The hanging lamps swayed slightly as they passed, casting moving shadows on the grimy walls. Zordon didn't turn to face him directly. Instead, he continued walking with steady steps. "Not fight the humans," he replied firmly. "That's just a joke from the Galactic Council. I won't hesitate. I will wipe them out for good. It's time to put an end to the Verkan Convention." Yzrek suddenly stopped. The cold breeze from outside grew stronger, causing his cloak to flutter. They were only a few meters from the tunnel's exit, but Yzrek hesitated. Once they stepped outside, there would be no turning back. The ship was likely already waiting for them. "The Verkan Convention exists for a reason, Zordon. It must be respected. Everyone who defied it paid a heavy price," Yzrek said, his expression filled with worry. Zordon turned back, his piercing gaze locking onto Yzrek. The golden light from the lamps reflected in his cold eyes. "I see. So you're a coward. You want to live like this forever, eternally afraid of humans and the Verkans. Stay here if you wish. Live in your misery, like a rat born only to obey. You'll never see the light outside or the glory it can bring." With those words, Zordon turned and resumed his march toward the exit, where the blinding light of the outside world awaited him. The contrast between the dim, filthy tunnel and the vast, open landscape beyond was stark. Yzrek remained frozen in place, watching as Zordon disappeared into the sunlight. His mind raced with thoughts he had tried to suppress for weeks. He hadn't expected his people to face war again, but circumstances had left them no choice. The memories of last night's meeting flooded his mind. The heated debates, the weight of the decision, and the fear of what was to come. After a moment of hesitation, Yzrek took a deep breath and stepped forward. Emerging from the tunnel, he was greeted by a breathtaking view of snow-capped mountains stretching as far as the eye could see. Below, a massive ship waited, its door still open as if Zordon had known Yzrek would follow. With a leap, Yzrek spread his long wings and glided down toward the ship, feeling the rush of wind against his face. The memories of the previous day replayed vividly in his mind, troubling him as he descended. In a colossal dome-shaped structure at the heart of the Noectus galaxy, countless alien beings filled a grand hall. They sat on floating platforms that served as their seats, each representing a different xeno-civilization. At the center of the hall stood Zordon, his cold gaze scanning the crowd as whispers about his recent decisions spread like wildfire. "So, you truly intend to attack the humans?" asked one of the creatures present. Its grotesque appearance, a bloated, slime-like being with greenish skin and yellow eyes, contrasted sharply with the aristocratic jewelry it wore. Despite its repulsive form, it exuded an air of authority. Zordon turned to face the creature, his expression indifferent. "Do you still have ears? Or should I cut them off? You should have heard me the first time." "I said yes," he replied sharply. The room fell silent for a moment, some widening their eyes in shock while others stifled laughter. The slimy creature growled softly, clenching its fists in anger. "You are dead. If the humans don't kill you, I will," it threatened. Before the tension could escalate further, a commanding voice boomed through the hall. "Enough!" All eyes turned to the newcomer, a tall, armored figure with long hair, pointed ears, and entirely black eyes. He rode a floating platform to the center of the hall, his presence commanding immediate respect. Everyone rose to their feet as he approached. Zordon's gaze followed the figure as he joined him at the center. The two now stood side by side, the focal point of the entire assembly. When the armored figure spoke, his tone was low and stern, silencing the room completely. "Are you certain this is what you want?" he asked Zordon, his unwavering demeanor finally causing a flicker of unease in Zordon's eyes. "I didn't expect you to come here, Rhagmanthes, Prince of the Virkans," Zordon replied. "Tell your father I am determined to complete my mission. I've decided that to pay my debts, I will conquer Earth. There is no other way." Rhagmanthes placed a finger on his lips, his expression contemplative. He shook his head slightly, as if calculating something in his mind. "Even if you conquered the entire Aurea and the Milky Way galaxy, you'd still owe us more than your life itself. Your desperation leads you to believe that offering Earth, one of the most valuable planets in existence, would finally settle your debt." His tone was sharp. "You would break the Virkan Convention, our people's sacred law, to pursue the impossible? Humans are our primary trade partners. We would never allow it. Yet your audacity, Zordon, will show you that defying the convention carries its own natural punishment. You do not attack humans. Soon you will understand why. Your words are filled with pride and confidence. But from that same mouth, you will soon spit blood." A brief silence followed, but Zordon broke it, his voice tinged with defiance. "They are your partners, yet you won't stop me?" he asked. "We don't need to," Rhagmanthes replied. "The consequences of your choice will be far worse than anything we could do to stop you here. But wouldn't you prefer Earth to be handed entirely to your father, rather than remain just a partner?" Rhagmanthes smirked. "As if my father would foolishly underestimate the humans like you do. Go then, but don't say we didn't warn you. Still, I admire your boldness, Zordon, speaking to me in this tone. Someone who could sever your head with a single touch." Zordon remained silent, averting his gaze. He descended from his platform and walked away, leaving his seat empty. The silence was so profound that only the sound of his footsteps echoed through the chamber. Upon reaching a door, he pushed it open and slammed it shut behind him. The Galactic Council erupted into murmurs, while Rhagmanthes observed Zordon's departure. Then, rising to his feet, he extended his arms. "Shall we continue the meeting?" He addressed the council, and without hesitation, they proceeded. Earth, 52 hours later. Ron sat on an old, worn-out couch in his dimly lit apartment, a half-eaten pizza box on the coffee table and a beer in his hand. The TV flickered in front of him, but nothing held his interest. He flipped through channels aimlessly, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. The news, sitcoms, and late-night shows all blurred together into a monotonous stream of noise. "Nothing good is on TV these days," Ron muttered to himself, his voice slurred from the alcohol. "Just garbage. I don't know why I still bother with this crap." He sighed deeply, leaning back into the couch. The room smelled of stale beer and sweat, a testament to the long hours he'd spent in front of the screen. Frustrated, he stood up and stumbled toward the bathroom. But halfway there, a sudden noise from the TV caught his attention. The news anchor's voice was urgent, cutting through the static. "Our reporter seems to be seeing something traveling across the sky at an incredible speed. We still don't know what it is. Let's go to the footage." Ron froze, his eyes glued to the screen. The live video showed a red-haired reporter standing on a windswept beach, her hair whipping violently around her face. She pointed to the sky, her voice trembling with fear and excitement. I have never seen this before. It's so fast the footage can barely capture it," she exclaimed. The camera panned upward, revealing a series of dark, metallic objects streaking across the sky at breakneck speed. They moved so quickly that the camera struggled to keep them in focus. The sound barrier broke with a thunderous crack, and the resulting shockwave nearly knocked the cameraman off his feet. They seemed to be increasing in number. "They're all coming from the horizon by the beach," the reporter shouted, her voice barely audible over the roaring wind. "Don't give up, Lampert." The camera shifted again, and the sight that followed was nothing short of apocalyptic. A massive swarm of ships filled the sky, their dark silhouettes blotting out the sun. At the center of the swarm was a colossal mothership, its size dwarfing everything around it. It loomed over the city like a floating mountain, casting an ominous shadow that turned day into night. Chaos erupted on the ground. Cars sped away in panic, their tires screeching against the asphalt. People ran out of their homes, abandoning everything in their desperation to escape. The reporter stood frozen, her eyes wide with terror as she stared at the camera, unable to speak. "Lampert, where are you going?" She managed to whisper, her voice trembling. Before she could say more, a bright laser shot through the air, striking her neck. Her head exploded in a burst of blood and gore, splattering across the camera lens. The cameraman dropped his equipment and fled, the sound of his frantic footsteps echoing as the recording cut off. Ron stood paralyzed, his beer bottle slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. His heart pounded in his chest, and his breath came in short, panicked gasps. For a moment, he thought it was some kind of sick joke or a scene from a movie, but the raw terror in the reporter's eyes had been all too real. He stumbled to the window, pulling back the curtains to see the chaos spreading through his own neighborhood. The sky was filled with the same dark ships, their engines roaring like thunder. People screamed and ran in every direction, their faces etched with fear. Ron's mind raced. He had to do something. He rushed to his bedroom, grabbing a winter jacket and his gun from under the bed. His hands shook as he loaded it, his thoughts a jumbled mess. He had never been in a situation like this before, but instinct told him he needed to move. As he ran back to the living room, he heard the sound of a car engine outside. Peering through the window, he saw his neighbor, Mike, pulling out of his garage. Without thinking, Ron bolted out the door, kicking it open in his haste. "Mike, wait!" he shouted, sprinting toward the car. Mike saw him and immediately unlocked the doors. "Get in, Ron." Ron jumped into the passenger seat, his heart still pounding. "What the hell is going on, man? All of this out of nowhere. Are we in World War III or something?" Mike gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. "Ron, those things, they're not from here. They're aliens." Zordon stood at the main viewport of the colossal ship, his arms crossed as he watched the destruction unfold below. The city was engulfed in flames, the lasers from his fleet cutting through buildings and reducing them to rubble. His expression was one of cold indifference, though a hint of contemplation lingered in his eyes. Yzrek approached from behind, carrying a thick notebook filled with handwritten notes. He flipped through the pages, his scaly fingers tracing the lines of text. "If I'm not mistaken, it's here," he said, pointing to a section of the beach below. "They should be waiting for us there." Zordon nodded, his gaze never leaving the viewport. "Well then, let's descend." He signaled to the ship's pilot, and the massive vessel began its descent. As it reached a comfortable altitude, Zordon walked to a platform where smaller ships were docked. Instead of boarding one, however, he stepped off the edge and plummeted toward the ground. Yzrek followed without hesitation, both of them spreading their dragon-like wings to glide gracefully toward the beach. From a distance, they could see a human figure waiting for them. The man was dressed in military attire, his cap pulled low over his eyes. He bowed slightly as Zordon and Yzrek landed on the sand, their wings folding behind them. "Is everything ready?" Zordon asked, his voice calm but commanding. The human nodded. "There's no doubt, sir." Zordon's lips curled into a faint smile. "Good. We'll find out soon enough." With that, he spread his wings and took flight once more, heading toward the heart of the city. Yzrek lingered for a moment, nodding to the human. "Good work," he said before following Zordon. As the two dragon-like beings disappeared into the distance, the human's body began to change. His skin stretched and burned, revealing a scaly, monstrous form beneath. Wings sprouted from his back, and sharp claws extended from his fingers. He let out a guttural roar before joining the swarm of ships that had descended upon the city, leaving destruction in their wake. The city was in ruins. The once bustling streets were now a war zone, filled with the sounds of explosions, screams, and the relentless hum of alien ships. The swarm of dragon-like soldiers and their metallic vessels swept through the city like a plague, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Buildings crumbled, fires raged, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. Amidst the chaos, humanity's defenses began to mobilize. Silver fighter ships, sleek and agile, shot through the sky, engaging the alien fleet in a desperate attempt to push them back. The humans fought valiantly, their pilots maneuvering with precision and firing plasma shots at the enemy. But the alien ships were far superior in both numbers and technology. The human fighters were quickly overwhelmed, their attacks barely scratching the surface of the enemy's armor. One human pilot, a seasoned veteran named Captain Alex Carter, gripped the controls of his ship tightly as he soared through the sky. His face was set in a grim determination, his eyes scanning the battlefield below. The city he once called home was now a fiery wasteland, and the sight filled him with a mix of anger and despair. How are we supposed to win against that? He muttered to himself, gritting his teeth as he fired another round of plasma shots. The enemy ships seemed unfazed, their dark hulls absorbing the blasts with ease. Suddenly, 3 alien ships broke formation and turned toward him, their engines roaring as they closed the distance. Alex's heart raced as he realized he was outnumbered and outgunned. But instead of panic, a strange calm washed over him. Time seemed to slow down, and every movement of his ship felt automatic, as if his instincts had taken over. He banked sharply to the left, dodging a barrage of laser fire. The enemy ships followed, their movements predictable. Alex's mind raced, calculating trajectories and angles. He typed a 3-digit code into his control panel, and his ship systems began to hum with energy. "Let's see how you like this," he whispered, pressing a button on his joystick. In an instant, his ship emitted a blinding flash of light, so intense that it momentarily blinded the pursuing aliens. When the light faded, Alex's ship had vanished. The enemy ships, confused and disoriented, collided with each other in a massive explosion. Alex's ship reappeared a short distance away, its systems glowing faintly. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "It worked," he said, a hint of triumph in his voice. "Teleportation. That's the key." But his victory was short-lived. Before he could celebrate, a shadow loomed over him. He turned just in time to see a massive, winged creature descending from above. Its golden eyes burned like fire, and its claws gleamed in the sunlight. Alex barely had time to react before the creature slammed into his ship, tearing through the hull with ease. "Foolishness," the creature growled, its voice deep and metallic. It was Zordon, his dragon-like form now enhanced with cybernetic armor. He ripped through the ship's controls, sending sparks flying in all directions. Alex's ship began to plummet toward the ground, its systems failing. He struggled to regain control, but it was no use. With no other option, he pressed the eject button, and his seat was launched from the ship just as it crashed into the ground. He landed hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Pain shot through his body as he struggled to free himself from the wreckage. His leg was trapped under a piece of debris, and he could feel the heat of the flames closing in around him. "Move! Damn it!" he shouted, pulling with all his strength. Finally, his leg came free, and he stumbled to his feet, his vision blurred and his body aching. But there was no time to rest. Zordon landed nearby, his massive form towering over Alex. The alien leader's eyes glowed with a cold, calculating fury as he approached. "You humans are resilient. I'll give you that," Zordon said, his voice dripping with disdain. "But this is where your story ends." Alex backed away, his mind racing. He had no weapons, no ship, and no way to fight back. But then he noticed something. A faint glow coming from the wreckage of Zordon's ship. It was a control panel, still active despite the damage. Without thinking, Alex lunged for it, his fingers flying over the controls. The panel responded, and a holographic interface appeared in front of him. He didn't fully understand the alien technology, but he recognized enough to activate the ship's self-destruct sequence. Zordon's eyes widened as he realized what Alex was doing. "No!" he roared, lunging forward. But it was too late. The ship's core overloaded, and a massive explosion engulfed the area. Alex was thrown backward, the force of the blast knocking him unconscious. When Alex awoke, the world around him was eerily quiet. The flames had died down, and the sky was filled with smoke and ash. He groaned as he sat up, his body battered and bruised but still intact. Zordon was nowhere to be seen. The explosion had taken its toll, but Alex knew better than to assume the alien leader was dead. He needed to regroup and find a way to end this once and for all. As he stumbled through the ruins, he came across a group of survivors. Among them was Ron, the man he had seen earlier, now armed with a shotgun and a determined look in his eyes. "You're alive," Ron said, relief evident in his voice. "We thought you were gone." Alex nodded, wincing as he put weight on his injured leg. "Not yet, but we're not out of this yet. We need to find their weakness." The group quickly filled him in on what had happened while he was unconscious. The alien fleet had retreated temporarily, but the mothership still loomed in the sky, a constant reminder of the threat they faced. The survivors had managed to salvage some weapons and supplies, but they were running out of time. "We need to hit them where it hurts," Alex said, his voice firm. "Their mothership is the key. If we can take it down, we might stand a chance." The group agreed, and they began to formulate a plan. Using the remnants of the alien technology they had scavenged, they managed to cobble together a makeshift device capable of disrupting the mothership systems. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. As they prepared for their final assault, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. He knew the odds were against them, but he also knew they had no other choice. This was their last stand. The group moved quickly, using the cover of the ruins to approach the mothership. The alien forces were distracted, their attention focused on the ongoing battle in the city. Alex and his team managed to slip through their defenses, reaching the base of the massive ship undetected. With a deep breath, Alex activated the device. A low hum filled the air as the mothership systems began to falter. Lights flickered, and the ship's engines sputtered. The aliens on board scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. The mothership began to descend, its massive frame casting an even larger shadow over the city. Alex and his team watched as it crashed into the ground, the impact shaking the earth and sending a shockwave through the area. But their victory was short-lived. As the dust settled, Zordon emerged from the wreckage, his body battered but still standing. His eyes burned with rage as he locked onto Alex. "You think you've won?" Zordon snarled, his voice filled with venom. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Alex stepped forward, his resolve unwavering. "Maybe, but we're not going down without a fight." The two clashed in a final, brutal confrontation. Zordon's strength and speed were unmatched, but Alex fought with everything he had. Using the alien technology he had scavenged, he managed to hold his own, landing blow after blow. In the end, it was Ron who delivered the final shot. As Zordon lunged at Alex, Ron fired his shotgun, hitting the alien leader square in the chest. Zordon staggered backward, his body collapsing to the ground. "It's over," Alex said, breathing heavily as he looked down at Zordon's lifeless form. But the battle had taken its toll. The city was in ruins, and countless lives had been lost. As the survivors gathered to assess the damage, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. They had won, but at what cost? In the weeks that followed, humanity began to rebuild. The alien threat had been neutralized, but the scars of the battle remained. The survivors worked tirelessly to restore what had been lost, their spirits unbroken despite the devastation. Alex stood on a hill overlooking the city, his thoughts heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he also knew that humanity had proven its resilience. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden light over the ruins, Alex felt a glimmer of hope. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. And as long as they stood together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead.